ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಪರಮ ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿಯವರು ಈ ನಮ್ಮ ಪೂರ್ಣಪ್ರಮತಿಯ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸೆಷನ್ ಅನ್ನ ಇನಾಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಅನುಗ್ರಹಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ, ನಿಮಗೆ ದಂಡವಾದ ಪ್ರಣಾಮಗಳು. ತಾವು ಈ ಸೆಷನ್ ಅನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಮನವಿ.
ಶ್ರೀ ಗುರುಭ್ಯೋ ನಮಃ. ಹರಿ ಓಂ. ರಮಯನ್ ಭವಸಂತಾಪಂ ರಮಯನ್ ಸಾಧುಚಾತಕಾನ್ ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೇಘಃ ಕೃಪಾದೃಷ್ಟಿವೃಷ್ಟ್ಯಾ ಪುಷ್ಣಾತ್ ಮಾಂ. ಪಾದಮೌಲಿಪರ್ಯಂತಂ ಗುರುಣಾಂ ಅಕೃತಿಂ ಸ್ಮರೇತ್ ತೇನ ವಿಘ್ನಾಃ ಪ್ರಣಶ್ಯಂತಿ ಸಿದ್ಧ್ಯಂತಿ ಮನೋರಥಾಃ. ಈ ದಿನ ಪೂರ್ಣಪ್ರಮತಿ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ಕೋರ್ಸನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ತುಂಬ ಸಂತೋಷದ ವಿಷಯ. ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ನಮ್ಮ ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಅರಿವು, ಅದರ ಪರಿಚಯ, ಅದರ ಮೂಲ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಆ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ನಮ್ಮ ಪರಂಪರೆಯ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಪರಿಚಯದಿಂದ ರಾಮರಾಜ್ಯದ ಕನಸಾಗಬೇಕು. ರಾಮರಾಜ್ಯ ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸ್ತವಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಬೆಳೆಯಬೇಕು. ಆ ರಾಮರಾಜ್ಯದ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ, ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಸಫಲವಾಗಬೇಕಾದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಪರಿಚಯ ಅವಶ್ಯಕ. ನಮ್ಮ ಈಗಿನ ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಅಭ್ಯಾಸ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತು ಕಾಲೇಜುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಮುಖ ವಿಷಯವಾಗಿದೆ. ಭಾರತ ದೇಶದ ಇತಿಹಾಸವೇ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರತ್ಯೇಕ ವಿಷಯವಾಗಿಯೂ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬೋಧಿಸುವ ಪದ್ಧತಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಆದರೆ ಭಾರತೀಯ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಇತಿಹಾಸಕಾರರ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 2,500 ವರ್ಷ ಮೊದಲಾದ ಕೆಲವು ಪಠ್ಯಗಳ ಪರಿಚಯದಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಹಿಂದಿನ ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ನಮ್ಮ ಸನಾತನ ಒಂದು ವಿದ್ಯಾಭ್ಯಾಸದ ಪದ್ಧತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಮಾಯಣ ಮತ್ತು ಮಹಾಭಾರತ ಇವೆರಡನ್ನೂ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಅಂತ ಪರಿಗಣಿಸುವ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ಇದೆ. ಅನೇಕ ಪುರಾಣಗಳು, ವೇದವ್ಯಾಸರು ರಚಿಸಿದ ಅನೇಕ ಪುರಾಣಗಳಿವೆ. ಪುರಾಣ ಮತ್ತು ಇತಿಹಾಸಕ್ಕೂ ಪುರಾಣಕ್ಕೂ ಇರತಕ್ಕ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕು. ಇತಿಹಾಸದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು, ಆ ನಡೆದ ಘಟನೆಗಳು ಅದು ವಾಸ್ತವಿಕವಾಗಿ ನಡೆದದ್ದು. ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಎಂಬ ಆ ಶಬ್ದದ ಆ ರಚನೆಯೇ ನಮಗೆ ಆ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಯನ್ನು ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟಪಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಮಹಾಭಾರತ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಮಾಯಣ ನಮ್ಮ ಪರಂಪರೆಯ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಕೇವಲ ಒಂದು ಕಾವ್ಯ ಅಥವಾ ಕಲ್ಪಿತ ಕಥೆಯಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ನಿಜವಾಗಲೂ ವಸ್ತುತಃ ನಡೆದ ಕಥೆ, ಅದು ನಡೆದದ್ದು. ಆದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಆಯಾ ಕಾಲದ ಸಂಘರ್ಷ ಅಥವಾ ಜೀವನ ಪದ್ಧತಿ ಮೊದಲಾದವುಗಳ ಪರಿಚಯವನ್ನು ಮಾತ್ರ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಲ್ಲದೆ ಸಾರ್ವಕಾಲಿಕವಾದ ಒಂದು ಮಾನವನ ನಡತೆ, ಅವನ ಚಿಂತನ ಕ್ರಮ, ಮನುಷ್ಯನಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಾಭಾವಿಕವಾಗಿ ಇರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಗುಣದೋಷಗಳು, ಆ ಗುಣದೋಷಗಳು ಅದೇ ಒಂದು ಪಾತ್ರ ವಹಿಸಿದಂತೆ ಮಹಾಭಾರತ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಮಾಯಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಕಥೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ನಂಬಿಕೆ, ಭಾರತೀಯರ ನಂಬಿಕೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಹೀಗೆ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನವಾದ ಪುರಾಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಅನೇಕ ರಾಜರ ಕಥೆಗಳು, ಮಹರ್ಷಿಗಳ ವೃತ್ತಾಂತಗಳು ಅದು ವಸ್ತುತಃ ನಡೆದ ಘಟನೆಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಕೆಲವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರಚನೆ ಮಾಡತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಪುರಾಣ ಕರ್ತೃಗಳು ಮನುಷ್ಯನ ಹಿತಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರವಾಗಿ ಅವನಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಬೋಧನೆ ಉಂಟು ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲವು ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನು ಸೇರಿಸಿರಬಹುದು. ಪರಿಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಇತಿಹಾಸವಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೂ ಸಾಧ್ಯವಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಪುರಾಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಮಾಯಣ ಮಹಾಭಾರತಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅನೇಕ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು, ರಾಜರು, ಅವರ ಉದಾತ್ತವಾದ ಜೀವನ ಮತ್ತು ಮನುಷ್ಯನಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಾಭಾವಿಕವಾಗಿ ದೋಷ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅಂಥ ಪಾತ್ರಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕೇವಲ ಕಾಲ್ಪನಿಕ ಪಾತ್ರಗಳು ಅಂತ ಪರಿಗಣಿಸದೆ ನಾವು ಅದು ವಾಸ್ತವಿಕವಾಗಿ ನಡೆದ ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳ ಪರಿಚಯವನ್ನೇ ನಮಗೆ ಆ ಪುರಾಣಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಇತಿಹಾಸಗಳು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾವು ನಂಬಬೇಕು. ನಮ್ಮ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಇತಿಹಾಸಕಾರರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಆ ಹಿಂದಿನ ಆ ಗ್ರಂಥಗಳು ಕೇವಲ ಕಾಲ್ಪನಿಕ ಹೊರತಾಗಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಸತ್ಯತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಎಂಬ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯವನ್ನು ಮೂಡಿಸುವ ಒಂದು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಂದುಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಬದಲಾಯಿಸುವ ಮತ್ತು ಆ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯ ಜೀವನವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿದ್ರು, ರಾಜ್ಯಭಾರವನ್ನು ಮಾಡುವ ರಾಜನ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ಹೇಗಿರಬೇಕು, ಹೇಗಿರಬಾರದು ಎಂಬ ವಿವೇಚನೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಮಹಾಭಾರತದಂಥ ಗ್ರಂಥದಲ್ಲಿ ಧರ್ಮ, ಅರ್ಥ, ಕಾಮ ಎಂಬ ಈ ತ್ರಿವರ್ಗದ ವಿಸ್ತಾರವಾದ ವಿವೇಚನೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಆ ವಿವೇಚನೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಆ ರಚನೆಗಿಂತಲೂ ಹಿಂದೆ ಆ ರೀತಿಯ ಒಂದು ಜೀವನ ಕ್ರಮ, ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಚಿಂತನೆ, ಧರ್ಮದ ಚಿಂತನೆ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಅದೊಂದು ಗ್ರಂಥ ರೂಪದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಥ ತ್ರಿವರ್ಗದ ವಿವೇಚನೆ ಇದ್ದಕ್ಕಿದ್ದಂತೆ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಮಗೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಬಹಳ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನವಾದದ್ದು. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರತಕ್ಕಂಥ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ವಾಸ್ತವಿಕವಾಗಿ ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆದ ಘಟನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಲ್ಗೊಂಡವರು. ಅದರ ಪರಿಚಯ ನಮಗಾಗಬೇಕಾದದ್ದು. ಹಿಂದೆ 11ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಮ್ಮಟಾಚಾರ್ಯ ಒಂದು ಕಾವ್ಯದ ಉದ್ದೇಶವೇನು ಅಂತ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡುವಾಗ ರಾಮಾದಿವತ್ ವರ್ತಿತವ್ಯಂ ಮತ್ತು ರಾವಣಾದಿವತ್, ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಜೀವನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡಬಾರದು, ರಾಮನಂತೆ ನಾವು ಬದುಕಬೇಕು, ರಾವಣನಂತೆ ನಾವು ಇರಬಾರದು ಎಂಬ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನವನ್ನು ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಮಾಡುವವರಲ್ಲಿ ಮೂಡಿಸುವ ಒಂದು ಹೊಣೆಗಾರಿಕೆಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದೆ ಆ ಕಾವ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ. ಅದು ಕಾವ್ಯವೂ ಹೌದು, ಇತಿಹಾಸವೂ ಹೌದು. ಆ ರೀತಿಯ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿ ಆ ಕಾಲದ ಆ ಗ್ರಂಥಕರ್ತೃಗಳಿಗೆ ಇತ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಮಮ್ಮಟಾಚಾರ್ಯ ತನ್ನ ಕಾವ್ಯಪ್ರಕಾಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಒಂದು ಈ ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಏನು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅದು ಬಹಳ ಉಪಯುಕ್ತವಾದದ್ದು. ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ರೀತಿಯ ಚಿಂತನ ಈಗ ನಡೀತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಕೊರತೆಯನ್ನು ತುಂಬಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯ ಈ ಪೂರ್ಣ ಪ್ರವೃತ್ತಿ ಈಗ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಯಶಸ್ವಿಯಾಗಬೇಕು, ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ನಂಬಿಕೆ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಈ ಕೋರ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಲ್ಗೊಳ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಾಗಲಿ ವಿದ್ವಾಂಸರಾಗಲಿ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳ ಉತ್ತಮ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಯಶಸ್ವಿಯಾಗಲಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹಾರೈಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ.
ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿಗಳಿಗೆ ದಂಡವತ್ ಪ್ರಣಾಮಗಳನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಆಶೀರ್ವಾದ ಬಲ ಹಾಗೂ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅನುಗ್ರಹ ಸಂದೇಶದಿಂದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಇನ್ನೂ ಯಶಸ್ವಿ ಆಗಲಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಆಶಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಮೈ ಹಂಬಲ್ ಪ್ರಣಾಮ್ಸ್ ಟು ಪರಂ ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ, who is gracious enough to bless us with his Ashirvachana, and I would like to give a brief note about Purna Pramati and its endeavors. First of all, let me welcome you all to this course. My name is Sanjeev Senurkar. I am a team member of Purna Pramati Center for Integrated Learning. Purna Pramati is a new school of thought and an idea of embarking new educational philosophy and thought process into the society, and which is founded and established by Param Pujya Vishweshatirtha Swamiji of Pejavara Adokshaja Matha in 2010. Since its inception, Swamiji and his Pitha and the present pontiff of Pejavara Matha, Shri Vishwaprasanna Tirtha Swamiji, and his Anugraha has been bestowed upon us in all our endeavors. It's been a fascinating journey of 11 years, and today we are blessed to have Param Pujya Vidyashrisha Tirtha Swamiji. He is also one of the advisors and source of inspiration for us in all our activities. Especially as we mentioned earlier in the note, that during his Purvashrama, Swamiji has been an outstanding scholar, academician, and expert in various Vedantic philosophies. So Purna Pramati is now has 550 strength, more than 550 students, comprises from pre-primary to PU education. Recently, a couple of years ago, we have started PUC program also. So this course, Sense of Past towards realizing Raama Raajya, will be a stepping stone, will be a foundational stone for our higher education journey. To pursue higher education, research, and in-depth analysis of our Indian knowledge traditions, we have started this on the auspicious day of Bhishmashtami with the blessings of Shri Vidyashrisha Tirtha Swamiji of Shri Vyasaraja Matha. I would also love to introduce the instructor of this course, or the facilitator of this course, Mr. Shri Pranav Kumar Vasishtha GV, who is also a member of Purna Pramati Center for Integrated Learning. Pranav ji is a student of Dharma Shastra and Bharatiya Samvidhana. He has been a graduate in computer science from IIIT Hyderabad, but his interest towards social sciences, and especially with the sense of the Dharma Shastra related aspects and political science and the constitution related aspects, pulled him to deep dive in the aspects of political science, constitution, and Dharma Shastra. And his vast reading, his observations are pretty much unique. We have been listening to him since many years, and he's been teaching in Purna Pramati, and he was taught earlier he was taught at IIIT Hyderabad, and he brings up a lot of reading and his observation, his anubhava to this course. I welcome you all once again, and I hand over the next proceedings to Pranav Kumar Vasishtha ji. Pranav ji, over to you.
Namaskar ellarigu. Namaste everyone. I would like to start with my Sashtanga Pramana to Sri Vidyashri Tirtha Swami for his gracious acceptance of starting this program, and he has already given us a direction, the manner in which we can as well proceed further by referring to Mamatacharya's Kavya Prakasha, specifically by pointing to Ramadivat Vartitavyam Natu Ravanadivat. We are into this course on sense of past, which is directed towards realizing Raama Raajya. There are a couple of points that I felt must be made. This exercise has actually been started with a specific intent, because as you all are aware, the current establishment has the government and the state of India is certainly, say, involved in a certain specific exercise towards the building of Rama Mandira in Ayodhya, and there's a great activity which is surrounding which the Sri Vishwaprasanna Tirtha Swamiji, the current head of the Peethadipati of the Pejawar Adhokshaja Matha, has made a specific point that the construction of the Rama Mandira, which is entrusted to trust by the Supreme Court, that shall be the kind of task that the trust shall as well take up. But more importantly, the activity or the kind of responsibility on all of us is to strive towards Ramarajya, and he has certainly made it a point to indicate that the priority is to establish Ramarajya, and it is in this sense that the question of Ramarajya, which was certainly one of the dreams of several people in the pre-independence era, and also one of the oft quoted, cited references as to what we expect to be the ideal condition in which we see the government move and government act, that in current times there is a, you could say, lessening of this spirit, and possibly this exercise that we are going to undertake could create a kind of ground to understand where we stand. I was very glad to see a range of questions as part of this exercise, where we requested the desirous participants to send 3 questions, and one of the most important questions which got posed was, what is Ramarajya? And there's a corresponding question also about what was Ramarajya. And while say what was Ramarajya and what is Ramarajya addressed, what do we do in order to move towards it? Because the course note clearly indicated that the exercise is indeed towards directing our efforts to realize, rather than just to speak of Ramarajya or to think of Ramarajya, but certainly to act on what can be done towards realizing Ramarajya. It is in this slide that the current exercise that we see is something that we shall focus on. The first week of this exercise is on the Constitution of India, because India, as we are currently situated, necessarily has to be understood as a constitutional polity. And within this sense of the constitutional polity, where do we stand with respect to Ramarajya is a point that must necessarily be addressed. And it is here that I'd like to start the proceedings of this particular session. I am sharing the slides which you could take a look at. I hope this is visible.
Yes, Pranav.
Yeah. So the poster certainly indicated a couple of shlokas which are from the Mahabharata and the memory of Ramarajya. The first part is that Dharma Nityaha Prajas Chasan Rame Rajyam Shasati. That is, in the Ramarajya, all the Praja, the people at large, were constantly focused on Dharma, and they acted only as per dharma. Then santushtaha sarvasiddharthaha nirbhayaha swairacharinaha naraha satyavrataschasan rame rajyam prashasati. Santushtaha, people were all content. Sarvasiddharthaha, whatever is the kind of thing that they desired to accomplish, they were able to accomplish. Nirbhayaha, they didn't have any fear of anything. And swairacharinaha, one of the desired kind of goal that we find in current times as to how can one be free without any kind of shackles. So free way in which one can keep on acting. So swairacharinaha, such was the way in which people lived in Ramarajya. And when and under what conditions can one be swairacharina is correspondingly specified in the next pada, naraha satyavrataschasan. There's an important point about the term naraha which is used in here, which is quite different from praja, and this is where we can as well start focusing on. The sense of naraha comes, if you look at say Amarakosha, there's a specific reference that one gets to see that naraha is expanded to say it is nrinanti nayanti sarvam swavashamiti naraha. That is to say, those who are naraha, that is a plural to include men and women, they are such that with their own effort they can bring everything under their control. And they were all taking up a vrata which is Satyavrata. And there are a couple of points that I felt are important to notice. In order to become naraha, that one be Satyavrata is a point that one can keep in mind. And the other question is dharma nityaha. Then actually the question that we ought to ask, given that say Raama is also stated to be Ramo vigrahavan dharmaha, what is it precisely that we mean by dharma? Before we go into that, I certainly like to offer my respects to the gurus from whom I have been able to learn a great deal. Vande Gurum Paramparam. So the four gurus that I have specifically mentioned in here, these are the kind of the thoughts that I am going to convey are certainly things which are inspired from their writings, sayings, as well as their actions. Swami Karpatriji Maharaj, Swami Nishalananda Saraswati Ji, the current Jagadguru of Shankaracharya of Puri, Vishweshatirtha Swami Ji, who is also the founder of Purna Pramati, and Vishwaprasanna Tirtha Swami Ji, the current Peethadipati of Pejavara Mata. There is a very strong connection between these people and also with respect to the entire Ayodhya Rama Janmabhoomi movement. These are things that we possibly as well come to look at in the course of this sessions. My friend Sanjeevana has pointed to you that today is a very special day. It is Bhishmashtami, and one point that you would have noticed throughout my mails sent to the participants is that even though this is 20th of February 2021, unless we specify that it is in common era, then we would not actually be specifying the calendar in which we are actually placing this. So the course on sense of past, given that it is focusing on time, space, memory and identity, it necessarily has a very important element in terms of how we start looking at time, given that we have multiple calendars, and the lunisolar calendar of India identifies today as Bhishmashtami, which is Magha Shukla Ashtami, and this is the day in the Rohini Nakshatra. Today also we have Rohini Nakshatra, this was the day when Bhishmacharya decided to give up his mortal life, and it certainly say worthwhile, because it was through his teachings that we have actually come to learn a number of what is dharma and what is not. The very fact that say we are currently able to as well specify this is dharma and this is not is on account of the kind of teaching that Bhishmacharya gave Yudhishthira. So it is appropriate that we also take an important recall Bhishmacharya, which is who is a very important part of the sense of past of this country. So who was Bhishmacharya? Vayagrapatya Gotraya, Sankritya Pravaraya cha, Gangaputraya Bhishmaya, Ajanma Brahmacharine, Bhishmaha Syantanavo, Veeraha, Satyavadi Jitendriyaha. I have actually listed a few shlokas again from the Mahabharata. This is from the section where Vyasa tells Yudhishthira about who was Bhishmacharya, and he specifically points out as to what is the kind of learning that Bhishma has had throughout his journey as a student, and the kind of susrusha, kind of efforts that he put in service of the gurus, and also the kind of engagement that he has had throughout his life in terms of learning. We find that he has learned from the Devaguru Brihaspati, Daitya Guru Sukracharya, and several rishis, including Bhargava, Chavana, Vasishtha, and he has also learned from Sanat Kumara, Markandeya, Parashurama, and having learned all these, he was also given the boon by his father, possibly only one of a kind of a person who with his own tapasya could also decide on when he is going to give up his life. So such is the kind of legendary tale that we learn from Mahabharata about Bhishmacharya, and we are also told that whatever he responded to Yudhishthira is akin to the Veda itself. So we'll have occasions to as well look at the words of Bhishmacharya as a part of this course in different at different points of time. But more importantly, we shall as well try and look further specifically on this current week, which is the sense of past as known from the Constitution of India. You are all aware that the Constitution of India is something that was written in English. It was also translated to Hindi, though the English version is what is the key to all the kind of interpretations that go about the Constitution of India since the adoption and since the promulgation of the Constitution in our country. That happened to be on the 26th of January 1950 of the Common Era, which let me also point out that if you look at the lunisolar calendar, Chandramana calendar fell on a Bhishmashtami. So if one were to actually celebrate the Republic Day, I'm sure some of you may actually have, when celebrating your birthdays in school or at home, you might actually have the memory of two calendars, one as per the Gregorian or the common calendar, which would give you the date as per the and the month of the year where you were born, day and the month, and there's also the tithi and the masa in which you were born, which is also taken into account. So if on that count, if you actually look at when was Republic Day to be celebrated as per the tithi, it is on Magha Shukla Ashtami, and that it happened to be, there are points where we can clearly say that the choice of 26th of January 1950 Common Era to be the Republic Day was to match with the 26th of January 1930 Common Era. That was the day when Purna Swaraj Declaration was made by the Indian National Congress. So this was only the focus to decide 26th of January 1950 Common Era. But one of the things that we certainly notice insofar as this particular course is concerned is to notice that there are things beyond what a human being can as well say imagine in terms of what exactly happens in reality. That is to say, if at all we actually start with the notion that there must be a reason for every action that is actually occurring in the world, then such a kind of a thing should also be able to explain such questions as, why is it that we are born in a specific place in the world, and why not in some other place? Why are we born to specific parents and not to some others? So there is a very important point with respect to this particular question about accepting that there are things which causally are occurrent, which result in the effects that we get to experience. So it might as well be the case that it is the invisible forces that actually acted in order to ensure that the 26th of January 1950 Common Era also turned out to be Bhishmashtami. And as you all are aware, the Constitution of India also gives us a national motto, which is the Upanishad Vakya, Satyameva Jayate. There is a entire reflection possible on, say, what this, even if we were to take only a point about this being a coincidence or a happenstance, what does this signify? And that significance is something that is necessarily important for us to as well start talking about the realizing of Raajya. And because there's one specific point to be noticed, because if we have to speak in terms of any sense of dharma, it must speak of something which is beyond this world. And in this reference, the term dharma, even if it were to be translated as religion, it should not be an issue at all. Because all religions across the world, they do accept that there is a world beyond this one. The content that they give might as well be different, but the very fact that, say, there is a distinction between this world and the other is a very important part that cannot be missed. And when we refer to, say, sense of past from the Constitution of India, one can look at the text of the Constitution to find, say, several references. We'll possibly go to the text of the Constitution in our next session this week itself, where there are specific points that actually are things which do carry only from the past. We can't actually explain it as an independent term from within the Constitution's text. That is to say, there are certain terms which are used in the Constitution for which meanings cannot be obtained from a dictionary, but they are to be understood in the context in which, say, they are placed, and that is capturing a sense of past. So that is something that we will actually do it in the subsequent session this week. But more importantly, the Constitution of India, I'm sure, say, some of you who have noticed the parliament sessions which are currently going on, there has been a debate in which one of the members of parliament has opened the calligraphic edition of the Constitution of India which speaks of 22 illustrations which are part of the Constitution of India. And this calligraphic edition was one of the signed copies by the Constituent Assembly. And there is a reference specifically to this picture which is there in the Constitution. That is what you find here. So the picture where you have the illustration where Raama, Sita and Lakshmana are all together. So the fact that, say, these three are together is in itself described in the legend that is printed along with this constitution, and it indicated that Rama, Sita and Lakshmana are returning to Ayodhya having conquered Lanka. That's the description that you get to see. These details we shall as well see in a short while. And this particular illustration has been something that did circulate quite a few times, specifically in the context of the Rama Janmabhoomi movement. And this needs to be as well, say, understood, because even if you look at the current ways in which law school education happens, it does not deal with the illustrations, nor does it explain how can constitutionalism in the world can actually deal with the question of illustrations, because all the constitutions in the world that we know of till now are only consistent of text and text alone. There may be decorations which are there, but to have illustrations which have been given specific detailing as to what it means is something that is very unique to the Constitution of India. And Professor, late Professor Navjyoti Singh, was very particular in to point out that Constitution of India is the only constitution which actually defines the Indian nation. You do not find the definition of a nation anywhere else. Is a kind of statement that he used to make, and it requires a lot of cerebration to understand what it means, specifically because we intend to see what is it that we the people actually been committed to in the process of our acceptance of this Constitution of India. This is a reference. I actually referred to Dharma and religion as equivalent. I think this is an important point to be recalled, that this is a specific excerpt from the Constituent Assembly debates, where the crest seal of Constituent Assembly of India was actually referred to by member of the Constituent Assembly by name Sri H.V. Kamath. For those of you who are aware, Sri H.V. Kamath was an associate of Subhash Chandra Bose, and he could not join the Indian National Army because he was found to be unfit, and he was expressly requested by Subhash Chandra Bose to take an active role in terms of the way in which the framing of the Constitution of India happens. Now, there's a point that he makes, and I believe that this is important to be read out. Now, sir, coming to the real meaning of this word, quote-unquote, religion, I assert that, quote-unquote, dharma, in the most comprehensive sense, should be interpreted to mean the true values of religion or of the spirit. Quote-unquote, dharma, which we have adopted in the crest or the seal of our Constituent Assembly, and which you will find on the printed proceedings of our debates, Dharma Chakra Pravartanaya, which certainly has the Ashoka Chakra in its formulation, which is also part of our national flag. There's a specific book which some of you who are interested might as well refer to, which went into the details of what does Chakra Dhwaja mean. And this was a fascinating work by Professor Vasudev Sharan Agrawala of Banaras Hind University. And what does it mean in variety of senses, whether it be in terms of the Vaidika Dharma, Jaina Dharma, Bauddha Dharma, all these have been elaborately discussed by Professor Agrawala in this particular work called Chakradhwaja. Now, how does this this chakra, Dharma Chakra, which is part of our national flag, and the national motto Satyameva Jayate, and the fact that, say, Bhishmashtami was when the 26th of January 1950 Common Era turned out to be, this particular combination, how is it that one can as well say make sense of towards a particular direction to act, is a point that we'll certainly see in a short while. So this spirit of Dharmachakra Pravartanaya, sir, to my mind, should be inculcated in the citizens of the Indian Union. The term citizens is very important, and we Indians are quite actually fortunate that we are linguistically quite very well equipped in not just one language but so many languages. We have access to very rich languages other than English, and when it comes to, say, translation of what is the English text into our own languages, what ought to be the kind of terms that we use becomes a very important point. Many of you may have noticed that, say, citizens may refer to people who are called as Paura, that is, those who are residents of Pura, which is a city. And there may be, say, other kind of translations in each of these Indian languages. But the term citizen, if it were to as well be in terms of Dharmachakra Pravartanaya, what would it take to actually relate it to the term Naraha that we just saw a while ago, is something that I'd like to pose as an open question for reflection, because this shapes, one, the manner in which we look at the past as well as our present, and the manner in which we can shape the future. So I continue with what Shri Kamath said. If honorable members will care to just go outside this assembly, it was in the Parliamentary Hall, so if you happen to visit the Parliament of India, once you enter it, there are, say, several domes where several shlokas which are written, and there is a shloka in Sanskrit on the Mahabharata, Nasa Sabhayatra Nasanti Vriddhaha Nate Vriddha Yena Vadanti Dharmam. So there is a reference to what makes for a Sabha, and Sabha cannot be existent without the presence of Vriddha. Vriddha doesn't mean old. Vriddha means those who are going to be prospering. Vardhana and Vriddha are connected. Nate Vriddha Yena Vadanti Dharmam. So you can't call somebody a Vriddha, he or she who does not speak of Dharma. And that Dharma, sir, must be our religion. Dharma of which the poet has said, Yenedam Dharyate Jagat, that by which this world is supported. This being the seal of the Constituent Assembly is something that we do not get discussed. This particular kind of a reference does not get discussed in the specific way in which Constituent Assembly of India and its proceedings are currently in discussion and discourse, which is why I'd like to necessarily contrast it with what the Honorable Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in whose name we see that the Constitution of India today is strongly related to. So this was on one of the final speeches of the Constituent Assembly, where the Honorable Dr. B.R. Ambedkar makes a specific mention of Sri H.V. Kamath. I'd like to read this in full. The proceedings of this Constituent Assembly would have been very dull if all members had yielded to the rule of party discipline. Party discipline, in all its rigidity, would have converted this assembly into a gathering of yes men. Fortunately, there were rebels. They were Mr. Kamath, Dr. P.S. Deshmukh, Mr. Sidhwa, Professor Saxena, Pandit Thakurdas Bhargava. Along with them, I must mention Professor K.T. Shah and Pandit Hridaynath Kumsru. The points they raised were mostly ideological, and by the way, whenever one refers to ideological points, it's a political stance that is actually spoken of. So yes, there is a political stance that is spoken of, and if one were to understand the sense of politics, we must accept that politics actually is the influence of the preferences of the other. And how is it that we see that the politics is something that can make people come together and as well aspire for a higher consensus than the current existing consensus is something that we need to strive towards. And this is a point that we notice is also one of the questions that is posed as to how can we actually think of such a politics. And this attempt of this course could be seen as to addressing some of those fundamental questions that may be required to be clarified to be in a position to think of such politics. Now, Dr. Ambedkar continues that I was not prepared to accept their suggestions, does not diminish the value of their suggestions, nor lessen the service they have rendered to the Assembly in enlivening its proceedings. I am grateful to them, but for them, I would not have had the opportunity which I got for expounding the principles underlying the Constitution, which was more important than mere mechanical work passing the Constitution. Now, I've actually referred to these 22 illustrations as part of the Constitution, the calligraphic edition of the Constitution of India. How did these come about? And there's a fine story that Professor Navjyoti Singh used to tell us, and he felt that when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, there was a commotion. You notice that when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, the Constituent Assembly was not actually having its proceedings. The draft constitution was actually being made at that time. So that was 30th of January 1948 in the Common Era when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. And the next meeting that happened was the one that actually introduced the draft constitution to the Constituent Assembly. And that was on the 4th of November 1948, Common Era. So there was a lot of people. If you actually look at the way in which Constitution of India has been, the Constituent Assembly functioned, the objectives resolution introduced by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru referred to Mahatma Gandhi as the father of the nation. And how is it that, say, we are going to commemorate Mahatma Gandhi for having led the Indian national movement and brought a kind of ground for this Constituent Assembly to act upon? That was the kind of point which actually made everybody ask, what is the way in which we are going to inscribe the father of the nation? So Sri Kamaleshwari Prasad Yadav on the 25th of November 1949 Common Era says, now coming to the shortcoming in the Constitution, the omission of a reference to the father of the nation, respected Bapu, strikes me the most. It was Bapu who showed us the way, taught us to walk, molded us to give the lesson of truth and non-violence. He taught us to make sacrifices. It is because of him that we have achieved our freedom, have been able to form this assembly and to prepare the Constitution that we are going to adopt and enforce throughout the country. Really, it's a very pity that we have not been to make, we have not made any mention of him in the Constitution. Now, as you know, 26th of November 1949 was when the Constitution was adopted, and today the current NDA government has actually declared it as the Constitution Day, and it's commemorated every year. So this is actually during the final proceedings. So at this time, the illustrations haven't yet been thought through. It is actually during the December of 1949 Common Era that the illustrations were actually discussed, and by May 1950 Common Era, the calligraphic edition along with the corresponding illustrations was actually made. That is to say that the illustrations and the design were first discussed, but they were actually made later. Having made known, they were actually signed by the Constituent Assembly members. What were the copies of the Constitution signed by the Constituent Assembly members? So this is 24th of January 1950. So you had, say, a minimal kind of illumination which is made. The only thing that now remains is the signing of the copy of the Constitution by the members. There are 3 copies ready. one is in English completely handwritten and illuminated by artists. The second copy is in print, which is in English. The third copy is also handwritten in Hindi. All the three copies are laid on the table, and members will be requested one by one to come and sign the copies. The idea is to call them in the order in which they are sitting in the house now. But as the Honorable, the Prime Minister has to go on public duty, I will request him first to sign them. So we can actually take a look at these signatures, and they are all available online. I shall as well be sharing with you the link where you can go through the illustrations as well as the beautiful handwritten constitution. This was the man who wrote this, Shri Prem Bihari Narayan Raisada, who actually has written the entire Constitution of India out of a labor of love. And Shri Nandalal Bose, who is from the Shantiniketan, was having a team of artists, his students and his colleagues, all of who brought this the images together. And how is it that these images have been, say, brought together? Now, this is the sense of past that I intend to as well bring to your attention. The way in which, say, the entire 22 illustrations have been divided into certain periods, and also it actually refers to both the time as well as space. So it's quite fascinating to notice, say, what are all the things that are actually included. The Mohenjo-daro period, the choice was a Mohenjo-daro seal, there's a bull, and there's also the Harappan script, which you would actually get to notice. So this is actually adorning the part 1 of the Constitution, which is the Union and its territory. So key question to actually ask is, what is this? Can we actually try and see a connection between the illustration and the part in which they have been inscribed? So in some instances, maybe one can make such a kind of imaginative connection, but in many other instances, that kind of imagination is quite lacking at the moment. So I certainly invite all of you to actually try and make sense of what this indicates, because as it is said in English, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so, and possibly more. How do we as well, say, understand it is a question that I'd certainly like to bring to your attention, and that plays a major role also in terms of understanding our polity in the past 70 odd years. This is the first illustration. At the end, there's a legend which actually also describes what is it that is there in the Constitution. So the description in the Constitution specifically mentions that there is a decoration with Mohenjo-daro seals. So union should be as strong as the bull is a point that I'll just post as a question. You could as well, say, come up with your own kind of count of the seal. Second illustration is reference to Vedic period. See, the periodization is something that we certainly see as students of history. One of the things that is taught is because the past is a vast territory, to talk of past as an entirety is difficult. So it is actually made into chunks, and each chunk is chosen to represent particular very specific or an important event that will enable us to start speaking of the way in which we look at that period. So currently people may not speak of Mohenjo-daro as much as they do of Harappa, or they speak of Indus and Indus Saraswati civilization, and they might as well refer to Kalibangan today, or they might refer to the excavations in India that have been going on. So there's an updation of that which is already there. But the Constitution refers to Mohenjo-daro period and follows it up with the Vedic period, which is how the modern historians have tried to club the way in which we understand civilizations in the country. There's a huge kind of debate which is still on whether the kind of connection between quote-unquote Harappan civilization and quote-unquote Vedic civilization, where there is a connection between the two or not. And this is a question that we may actually get to take a look at it, if need be, during the course of these sessions. But key point is, insofar as the reference to Vedic period is there, it actually comes in the part 2, which describes the citizenship of India. And there's a description in the constitution which speaks of it as the scene from the Vedic ashram, it's a Gurukul. Now, since we are speaking of citizens, say students to citizens is a kind of formulation. We see that in social sciences, there's a reference to man as a social animal, man as a political animal. These are several kinds of ground principles around which an entire theorization is actually erected. Now, similarly, if you ask, do we have, say, such a conception that one can ask for? Indeed, it turns out that in the Sanskrit tradition, one can certainly find certain references. So, Yaskacharya, who is known for his Nikhantu and the Nirukta, in the Nikhantu and the Nirukta, we find a reference where Yaska poses a question, Manushyaha Kasmat. And the response also is given, which says it is Matva Karmani Sivyanti. That is to say that man is a suturing being. That is, he is someone who sutures. He sews. What does he sew each together? So the suturing happens between the various deeds that he does, and these deeds are woven together, sutured together by the imagination of the mind. So who is Manushya? A man is such a being who actually gets his deeds which are sutured together with the imagination of the corresponding man's mind. Now that is something which is the generic description. Now, I have actually asked a question a while ago. When is it that a Manushya can become a Nara? Nara being the person who can, with one's own kind of effort, ensure that all that is to be acquired is actually brought under one's own control. So if the sense by which we think of citizenship and the nature of education that one actually receives from a Gurukula. Gurukula is meant to be a place where you learn. So the fact that, say, one can actually think of education as that which transforms a Manushya to a Nara or a Nari is something that is worth exploring, specifically in the context of our own current endeavor to try and imagine what does it mean to actually think of realizing Raajya. The third is the epic period, because this is the most famous one, which has been, say, doing a lot of rounds as well. We are actually looking at the fundamental rights section, part 3, where Raama, Sita and Lakshmana are all together. So description in the constitution is a scene from the Ramayana. So you see, the epic period comes after the Vedic period, and this again is the modern historical periodization that we currently have, which actually speaks of the scene from the Ramayana is conquest of Lanka and recovery of Sita by Rama. So since it is part of the fundamental rights, recently some of you may have seen that the Member of Parliament from Bengaluru South, Shri Tejasvi Surya, has written an article speaking of how Raajya and the connect with the constitution are there by actually referring to this particular thing, and that particular reference is something that you might as well find a lot more happening in the days to come, and that precisely puts the question about whether we can as well understand what was Raajya as what is Raajya with respect to the reference to the fundamental rights that we currently have. That question requires to be addressed, and requires to be addressed concretely by looking at the kind of questions that need to be posed, and that necessarily have a great deal to do with the sense of past that we carry. So this course would certainly like to address that. If you haven't actually come across this article, I shall share that as well so that you can take a look at it. And recently, of course, you did have, say, reference again by Sri Parvesh Verma, who is the Member of Parliament from one of the 7 Delhi seats, who was also referred to this particular in the Lok Sabha. So given that, say, there is this talk going on, it does make sense to as well try and reflect on the question that would entail in the entire sequence of how we shall look at these illustrations. The fourth illustration is that of a scene from the Mahabharata, and this is part 4, is Directive Principles of State Policy, and it is Sri Krishna propounding Gita to Arjuna. That's the description available in the Constitution. So Directive Principles of State Policy would mean that, say, the kind of Gita instruction is appropriately giving a direction to the state is something that one can as well ponder over. Then comes the Mahajanapada and the Nanda period. This is part 5, the Union, and we have the description in the Constitution, which is a scene from the Buddha's life. This is the first sermon at the Deer Park, that is Ishipatana Sarnath, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So you see, the first sermon that Gautama Buddha has given to his disciples was the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, which in Pali is Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So the Union is the part 5 in which you find this. So whether the Union is to set the wheel of Dharma in motion, I mean, the Union government in India has a obligation to do so, is a question that one might as well, say, reflect on. And the fact that, say, India chose to have a greater sense of centralization as opposed to the decentralization of the federal structure, federal principles, which we'll also get to see as part of the current debates which are going on, may also have to be understood with this overarching principle that is at play. There's a continuation of the Mahajanapada and Nanda period, and this again is a very important picture. This refers to a scene from the Mahavira's life. Mahavira is stated to have attained Kevala Jnana under a Sala tree. So the beautiful construction of this leaf-like structure in there is the way in which Sala tree's leaf would look like. So this is one of the very fine illustrations that one finds in this, amongst these 22 illustrations. Part 6 is part of the states in Part A of the first schedule. Today, of course, we know that the Constitution of India has states and union territories. But when the Constitution of India was first adopted, there were Part A states, Part B states, and Part C states, each of which was different because of the way in which each of those states has become part of the Union of India. So there were criteria based on which, say, each of these came together, and it is only post the States Reorganization Committee's report and action that we find these Part A, Part B, Part C states being removed and they being replaced with states and the notion of a union territory. Then in the sequence of this historical periodization, we have the Mauryan period. This is one of the key points that one might as well say recall because you may be aware that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru felt that the Emperor Ashoka was certainly the kind of ruler who needs to be emulated. So the this particular illustration is referring to the various Bauddha bhikshus who were sent to different parts of India as well as abroad. So the scene depicting the spread of Buddhism by Emperor Ashoka in India and abroad is what is the description written in the Constitution of India. So it states in the part B of the first schedule. So now point is, if the spreading Dhamma, or insofar as say the point of the foreign policy is concerned also, so this is possibly something that actually brings together the point about the union which we just pointed out, the wheel of Dhamma in motion, and spreading Dhamma, role for the states, the federal states. So these days we find that individual states have also been asked to try and negotiate with different foreign countries to think of a variety of trade connections. So whether this is what we need to read into it is something that I'd leave it open. This is the golden period according to the modern historians, specifically of the nationalist kind, Gupta period, which is part of the part 8. The states in the part C of the first schedule are included in it, and there's a description in the constitution. It says, seen from the Gupta art, its development in different phases. If one actually carefully observe this, you would find that there are temples, there are different kinds of the ornaments that are actually referred to, the sculptures which are present, and also the kind of constructions that were actually imagined. So each of these is put together, and there's a continuation of the Gupta period again in the part 9, which includes the territories in part B of the first schedule and other territories not specified in that schedule. So you find that, say, if one observes carefully, you find a deer in there. So for those of you who have read Abhigyana Shakuntalam, you would remember this beautiful expression that Kalidasa gave, Griva Bhangabhiramam, with reference to the way in which the deer was with fear actually being hit by Dushyanta's arrow, was at one moment in time touching the sky and the other coming down on it. So it was actually, say, going so fast, and with the deer looking behind with fear. So here is a reference to that play possibly being enacted, and the scene from Vikramaditya's court. And this Vikramaditya is Chandragupta Vikramaditya of the Gupta dynasty. And this again is a key point of the sense of past, where we'll have to return to this to as well try and understand what is the age of Kalidasa, which is a highly disputed story. And modern historians would like to say that the golden age is the Gupta period, and that's one reason why you find, say, the reference to Gupta period not once, actually twice. Here is the Nalanda Mahavidyalaya, which is actually present. It has, say, two descriptions. One, of course, the seal of it, and the second is the various bhikshus who were actually together in the Nalanda University. So the scheduled and tribal areas is what is described in the part 10 of the original constitution India. And the description is the scene depicting one of the ancient universities, Nalanda. So clearly, whether it be the Vedic Gurukula or the presence of the university, there's a reference of learning that comes twice as part of this these illustrations. Then comes the medieval period. So amongst the previous ones ought to be taken naturally to belong to the ancient ones. So in the part 11, which is part of the relations between the union and the states, here is a illustration from one of the fine sculptures that one finds in Konark Sun Temple. Description in the constitution is that it's a scene from the Orissan sculptures. So you can clearly see that, say, there's a horse which is actually put down one of the enemies, and so you would actually notice that this particular illustration is actually the complete one, whereas if you go and see the sculpture, some parts of it are actually damaged. So it's an artistic reconstruction of it, and it's something which is so very beautiful in itself. Medieval period continues. You have part 12, finance, property, contracts, and suits. So here is the image of Nataraja. If you actually observe, it also has the point about swastika. You see, it is swastika. If you actually show this, people might as well mistake it to be the Hakenkreuz, which is the symbol of Nazis. But then Hakenkreuz and the swastika are different, and the art of having an anti-clockwise swastika is actually something that a friend of mine who is a dancer has made a very important point. That is to say that the swastika which is clockwise refers to the world which is static, and the one which is anti-clockwise is actually speaking of the dynamic nature of the world. So the fact that, say, Nataraja Tandava is to be understood in terms of how the entire world is actually operative, and finance, property, contracts, and suits, they are the ones which actually run the kind of show and the dynamism that is involved in it. Possibly the fact that, say, these two come together is a point which brings out very insightful kind of connection. One could as well, say, go on to try and elaborate on, say, what could this mean? If only we can as well try and ensure that the manner in which finance, property, contracts, and suits are also providing that kind of Ananda Tandava that we might as well find Nataraja do. So how would that happen is something that one has to as well, say, imagine in terms of our own laws and the application of the laws in practice. Now, the medieval period is something that is again, say, that we get to see in here. And we have a specific reference to the trade, commerce, and intercourse within the territory of India. This is part 13 of this. And here is one of the most important illustrations in the context of Bhishmashtami also, because this is a reference to Bhagiratha, the great Raja of the Ikshvaku dynasty, who was able to bring Ganga from the heavens onto earth. There's a scene from Mahabalipuram sculptures. Mahabalipuram has this huge mural relief in which, say, this is one section. Some people have tried to speak of this as a Arjuna's tapasya, but then one has also found that, say, this could also be seen as the Bhagiratha tapasya. So we have anyway the description offered by the artists who have illustrated this. They clearly said this is a scene from the Mahabalipuram sculptures, Bhagiratha's penance and the descent of Ganga. So Bhagiratha is actually, say, recalled as part of this, and we at Purna Pramati have tried to make a case specifically a couple of years ago when, say, one of our cherished mentors and somebody who has given us great degree of direction in terms of how we can go about our task of Parampara Bij Raksha. I'm actually referring to Swami Gyan Swarup Sanan, who was formerly Professor G.D. Agarwala, who fasted unto death in order to ensure that there is uninterrupted flows in at least the source streams of Ganga. So what we actually get to see in terms of these illustrations and the kind of current activities that are going on in the country and the world, they can certainly be seen to be directly related, and we can possibly say, with the development of a sense of past, specifically of the kind that Bhagiratha has had, and the kind of importance he saw, because Ganga was not brought forth onto earth in order to quench the thirst of people, but it was to actually provide for the Urdhaloka Gamana, to attain his ancestors who could not actually, say, ascend to higher worlds. It was to purify them that Ganga was brought down onto earth. So that spirit and that knowledge in terms of our current action can actually play a major role in terms of how we think of our actions in the present and also the nature of future that we imagine for ourselves. The 14th period, and this is something which is interesting, you see within the medieval period, the reference to Muslim period is actually strange because the Muslim period currently is referring to Akbar, and there's a portrait of Akbar with Mughal architecture. So if you actually look at it carefully, you might as well see Fatehpur Sikri's point. This is as part of the part 14 of the Constitution of India, where part 14 is about the services under the union and the states. That is the civil services that are actually referred to. A key point to be noticed is that Akbar is actually having a court where, say, there's a lot of activity in terms of literary things which are going on, which can be seen. There's also the beautiful architecture which is around. So this has been termed to be Muslim period, and some of you may be aware that the British, when they actually came to India, one of the things that a person like James Mill, who wrote the History of British India, claimed is that we Britishers have actually gifted you the history of your own country. You haven't had any such kind of a thing earlier. We have actually gifted it to you. And he, having set the kind of motion towards writing of aggregate history, has actually divided time into Hindu period, Muslim period, and British period. And later, historians have actually found that this kind of a periodization is communal, and it is also not probably true also, because when Akbar was ruling, you had some very fine Hindu kingdoms which were also ruling across the country. You had, say, down south, different kind of rule. So to call this as a Muslim period may not possibly be correct. Is also a point that modern historians would like to make. But as it is in the current Constitution of India's the periodization, the Muslim period exists, which means that, say, the Muslim period needs to be recognized as it is, and that's something which is important as well. The continuation of Muslim period actually speaks of portraits of Shivaji and Guru Gobind Singh. So Shivaji and Guru Gobind Singh, and as you know, were actually one way pitched against the final strong ruler of the Mughal period, Aurangzeb. And the fact that, say, we have portraits of Shivaji and Guru Gobind Singh and also a mention of Muslim period is a very interesting kind of point. So which is where, say, whether the periodization that we have currently may have to be, say, thought through once again. That's a question that, say, is open, and it's something that can be taken up as an exercise. I've actually created an exercise to celebrate on these illustrations, which I hope to share with you. And you might as well find interesting way to take it up. The 16th illustration is the British period. It speaks of portraits of Tipu Sultan and Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai. And this is the rise against the British conquest. This is part of the part 16, special provisions relating to certain classes. So the Constitution of India has these illustrations, and for those of you who are from Karnataka, you may have noticed that in the newspapers there was a great furor when the previous Congress government in the state decided to celebrate what they called as Tipu Sultan Jayanti. Tipu Jayanti, the term Jayanti sounds quite odd with Tipu Sultan, but still, say, the fact that, say, the celebrations were actually thought of, and they wanted to do so, and it was something that gave a lot of heartburn to those people who were wronged by the actions of Tipu Sultan in the past. And you do find, say, the kind of opposition that come from people in the Coorg, in the regions of Mandyam, and also in the coastal Karnataka regions. But if one were to think it purely in terms of whether it's a constitutional exercise to try and celebrate Tipu Sultan, then given that this illustration is present as part of the constitution, one should not actually object to such a kind of a celebration by the state, because it would actually mean that, say, one of the cherished figures of the Constitution of India is actually being commemorated. So that is something that is what stands. And you may also have noticed that, say, in all of the discussions, nobody actually speaks of trying to refer to these illustrations, and there's actually a desire to say that they should not be there. Then what ought to be the case? Because to a large extent, one could say that these illustrations which are there in availability of this calligraphic edition of the Constitution of India widely circulated, nor is it taught, nor is it actually reflected on in the country, shows something very, very important about our own sense of past and our own discomfort with lots of past that we clearly know of, but aren't able to, say, put them together, piece them together, to try and have a way in which we can think of all these and take them in stride. So that is something that certainly needs to be reflected on, and that's one of the key points that this course desires to, in the manner in which it will be structured, try and raise. And I do hope and wish that participants would as well find it exciting to engage with these questions. I've actually read out Sri Kamleshwari Prasad Yadav's point on no reference to Bapuji, no kind of remembrance of Mahatma Gandhi. And so Professor Navjyoti used to say that when this point came in, that we can actually have an illustration of Mahatma Gandhi in the Constitution of India. Naturally, there was a question posed, can we just have Mahatma Gandhi? As is a country which has, say, such a huge kind of a past, and the memories of the past are also so very strong. In the discovery of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru clearly mentioned that as if this were an ancient palimpsest, which has had several kind of writings and overwritings. In spite of all that, all the different kinds of writings, they still have their presence in the current times. So such was the kind of metaphorical representation of what we get to see. So even if people mention that, say, there's something called as Vedic period, you do find that, say, Vedic yajna still being performed in the country. So all the past that we actually get to notice is also being in some corner of the country still actively pursued, and which is one reason why we say we are possibly, say, the only country in the world which still has a living civilization that is aeons old. Now, in that context, you notice that India's freedom movement begins with the reference to Father of the Nation Gandhiji's Dandi March and the steps to Purna Swaraj, because the Dandi March was very significant for its kind of formulation, and across the globe, the kind of attention that the press has given to this manner of Dandi March, as well as the kind of strategy that is used. You would find that, say, it also finds its reference to the Sikh approach to present oneself with Panch Parmeshwar. So the Khalsa and the decision to have this beautiful scene that one gets to see in this movie called Gandhi, where you'd find that as one set of 5 people come forward, you had a lathi charge and they fall, the women take them away, and there's one more set of 5 people who come forward. So such was the kind of resistance that is approached, and that's something which was found nowhere in the kind of memory. This particular illustration was made by Nandalal Bose much before than this adorning in the Constitution of India. So there's also, say, this reference to this was used earlier also, but it was found to be very important to actually find the portrait of the Father of the Nation, Gandhiji's Dandi March. Some of you may have actually noticed that India's freedom movement, Bapuji the peacemaker. So Noakhali riots and Suhrawardi is standing behind Mahatma Gandhi, and then there is this power of soul force in emergency. So the Noakhali riots and his tour is also memorialized as part of the illustrations in the Constitution of India. Some of you may have noticed in newspapers that may have come a few years ago that when Sri P. Chidambaram was the Home Minister, a 6th standard girl sent a Right to Information Act request stating whether there exists any record at all that actually states that Mahatma Gandhi is father of the nation. And Sri P. Chidambaram responded that no such kind of a document exists in the government records. So if I were the teacher of the of that 6th standard girl, I'd certainly point out to this this calligraphic edition of the Constitution of India, where the description categorically says, and it also gives the illustration. So one can as well try and notice that the father of the nation is now inscribed also and illustrated, and that actually animates the kind of way in which people have imagined and looked at past. Equally important is the 19th illustration, which spoke of the revolutionary movement for freedom. Description in the Constitution says Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and other patriots trying to liberate India from outside of India. I just try to expand this so that you may get to see. There is something written in here. It says, Mahatmaji, father of our nation, in this holy war for India's liberation, we ask for your blessings, good wishes. With a salute from Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. This is as part of the Part 19 miscellaneous section. Now, key point to notice is that insofar as the popularization of the father of the nation epithet for Mahatma Gandhi is concerned, the role of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is very significant. And you have father of the nation, Bapuji, referred not once but twice in these illustrations. So naturally the being of Mahatma Gandhi and the understanding of Mahatma Gandhi is very important in terms of the kind of present that we live, and that also we'll get to see in the course of our subsequent sessions. One of the fascinating points that we get to see as part of these illustrations, we've actually come almost to the end of these illustrations. The 20th illustration speaks of natural features. There's a scene from the Himalayas. The Himalayas, if at all there are people who amongst you would like to think of environment as something which is to be protected by the Constitution of India, then there's actually a portrait of the Himalayas. Recently, you're aware of, flooding incident in the Chamoli district in the Uttarakhand. So natural features are also to be protected. It's not just in the writing, but also it's something which is in the form of illustrations. The 21st one shows a scene of the desert, and the 22nd one shows a scene of the ocean, along with, these. Now, the point is, I'd like to pose these questions. What exactly is the Constitution of India? Is it just the text? Should we include the text and the illustrations? Is it something more? And I've already referred to Professor Navjyoti referring to these illustrations actually making